Global warming politicians turn out to be among the biggest environmental vandals I have seen. In Scotland, for instance, I now read that the government there has chopped down 16 million trees to create wind farms. 16 million! Save the planet, chop down the trees. How does that make sense? And the bad news is the same thing is going on here. Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek is considering whether to give the go-ahead to a huge new wind farm at Chalobin in Queensland, in this lovely part of the world. And if you want to see what wind farms do to the bush, here is what was done not far away at Caban. The trees cut down for another wind farm, plus great clearings for transmission lines. I mean, just look at the size of these turbines, 1/4 kilometre high, and a menace to the bird life as well as spoiling the view. And by the way, brolgas fly there. And they do all this to save the planet. I tell you what, if some guy said, I want to do a really big factory and it just involves clearing all that land, that'd be thrown out in the ear. Joining me is Stephen Nowakowski, is a photographer campaigning against the Chalobin development and is a member of Rainforest Reserves Australia, founding member actually. Stephen, thanks for your time. I'm looking at this stuff and thinking, how could we let this happen? What impact are these wind farms having up your way?
Yeah, a tremendous impact. These are wind farms that are going ahead in the absence of any planning whatsoever and no compliance, no regulations. They're going into wonderful forests, remnant forests. These are forests that have been untouched. And the reason why they're untouched is because of their remote access, their wilderness areas, inaccessibility. And it's those areas that have escaped things like urbanisation, industrialisation, and it's those areas now that are being targeted by the wind industry. And for example, the latest Queensland Jobs and Energy Plan have indicated that we're going to need about 600,000 hectares of land in Queensland to get to that 2032 target. And that's for 10 gigawatt.
Way.
But you've got to times that by 3 because of the capacity factor of renewables. So we're looking at 1.8 million hectares of land in Queensland to be covered in glass and steel. And we need to do that within 7 years to meet our 2032 target.
They say, I think we need to have 9 times more wind farms than we have already. So imagine that. And we're talking about like 50-storey high wind farms on top of hills. So that it's not just the area there that they're spoiling the view for miles and miles and miles around. Now, the company behind one of those wind farms I just showed said, well, oh, look, yes, but the bush there is actually pretty bad quality, lots of weeds, not a big problem. What do you make of that?
Well, that's to be expected. They're not going to say that on that particular site is where the magnificent brood frog was actually discovered. On that site is one of the is a stronghold for the greater gliders. It is a wonderful site. It's surrounded on 3 sides by the Evelyn Conservation Park and the Bluff State Forest. It's a beautiful place, and there is no evidence of weeds. It had light grazing many, many years ago, but this is what the wind farm industry does. There is lies and deception out there, and it's look, I'd go as far as to say it's a cowboy industry, and they're getting away with developing country that would have never have been developed before because of its high biodiverse attributes.
It's so weird, isn't it? I've seen whole developments saying Victoria stopped because of the orange-bellied parrot or a blind moth, things like that. But here, the excuse is they can seem to do anything, and the excuse is, oh yes, but we're saving the planet. Now, Steve, for me that really jars that argument. But I am a global warming skeptic, and I would hazard a guess that you, being a photographer from that part of the world, are not. You're right on board. What do you? And I might be assuming unfairly, but what do you make of that argument? We can do this because we are here to save the planet.
You can't destroy biodiversity to save the planet. And renewables will have a part to play in the decarbonisation future. But by covering 1.8 million hectares of country with glass and steel is not going to save the climate. And it's an oxymoron to think that we should be clearing biodiversity to save the climate. So renewables have a part to play, but they're not the solution. They're not the entire solution to climate action.
Well, this is why I don't understand the opposition to nuclear, because you can just put a nuclear plant exactly where the coal-fired power stations are. You don't need to build any more power lines, nothing. You don't have to destroy any more forests. You can do it quite simply. And they say no. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so look, up until 3 years ago, I was very anti-nuclear. And the reason being is, when I look back, I was naive and I was brainwashed, I believe, into the fear of nuclear. And what I had to do was put my ideology aside and look at the facts. And the fact is a very safe industry. And we need to look at what's happening in other countries. No other country has decarbonised 100% using renewables. It can't be done. It literally can't be done. A renewable only option. And what we need to do is start looking at option B. And we need to have all options on the table. It is, if it's a climate emergency, we need to look at all options. Nuclear is the option.
Is the obvious one,
I'd like
Stephen. How can we do this to our country?
Yeah.
How can we do this to our country? And believe me, there's going to be much more of it. Stephen Nowakowski, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.